It's finally time for us to wrap up the base game with all the stuff in the northern portion of the map. This place is large and home to several major pieces of content, such as the legacy dungeons, most of the story bosses, and the end of the damn game. But they did slack off in the overall crap a bit, so I'm hoping it'll be a lot shorter than the last one, even if there's a bit more than 15 seconds to say about a lot of the content. At any rate, there's no point risking that sort of runtime again, so let's just jump in. Our first stop in is something of a reverse time travel, since I got caught by Patch's abductor trap to get myself a fire weapon for the hand monsters way back at Karia Manor, just to make sure I didn't skip a step of his quest by going into Altus too quickly. I'm only covering the boss here for now since most of the Volcano Manor was left untouched. I outdamaged the abductor virgins by a mile and I couldn't be happier about it. It's 2 elite enemies with arena covering charges and wide repeating swings at the same time. That is not fun. Of course it's not fun. With that little divergence, we're out into Altus Plateau. I like the autumnal yellows and oranges of the colour scheme here, and the Windmill Village is a wonderful mess of crazy dancing ladies which I just adore. But it falls off pretty hard after that. This is the point where the lack of content to fill in the space takes hold pretty hard. There's really very little here to fill out the area, and it's not overly interesting to navigate. As with Caelid, I had some places that I wanted to rush to, but I ducked off quickly to clear a garbage cellar boss on the way through. Given this demi-human queen couldn't even muster the energy to make a single attack, I probably shouldn't be counting cellar bosses, or maybe Miyazaki shouldn't have clogged up his game with trash. I didn't really do anything in the capital outskirts portion of the plateau, but I did duck in here for all the seeds, so I may as well cover it now. This spot is basically just pure spectacle. The epic staircases leading up towards the city, the ruined battle remains complete with a surprise Margit morph, a bunch of overworld bosses crammed into this tiny little space. There's the duo tree sentinels, the Blackblade gargoyle, and that Margit clone all in the first 2 minutes of the zone. It's pretty nuts. Outside of that, there's not a whole lot to say about it though. It is pretty dense with this many mini dungeons and bosses in such a small space, but it's quite a nice build up for the main dungeon mostly. The first cave I found had the invisible Black Knife assassin that I held off the Leone catacombs for, so I had to make a quick trip through 4 bosses and mini bosses into the capital grounds to get the visibility torch. The Tree Sentinel duo are the only one here with a health bar, and ironically, they're very easy to separate, so it was no biggie taking them on as not a duo. The Sage's Cave is a cave with skeletons, a bunch of invisible walls, and 2 bosses. Caves are rubbish, and adding in respawning enemies and the threat of missing stuff if you don't start smacking walls doesn't help them. The first boss, Necromancer Garrus, isn't too big of an issue, but I did have a couple of close calls as I expected to poise break him, but he just kept on trucking. His main deal is that he has adds, of which there are quite a few, and some death spells which make some spectral dudes pop out as well. As always, trash adds are lame, but overall, it could have gone better, it could have gone worse. The second boss is more copy-paste repeated assassin spam, but this time, it's invisible. With my fancy magic torch, which makes him visible, he wasn't really a big deal, but I definitely wouldn't want to do it blind because it's a stupid and obnoxious idea. Sure, the solution is pretty cheesy, but hey, I avoided using ashes on a stupid idea that deserves to be mimicked into paste. The dour start to our Altus mini-content tour continues with the unsightly catacombs, which is an absolute filler zone. I guess we've never had misbegottens in a catacombs before, but we've had them elsewhere, so is that really anything? Outside of that, this is straight paths with no twists. Worthless content. I swear, they're just making these boss squads through ad-libs now. The Misbegotten and Perfumer duo is a couple of unrelated regular enemies. I probably should have taken out the mage first, but I was testing out the hyper armor of the Lion's Claw too much to bother. And would you believe it, but the Winden Catacombs is more filler. This one's probably the hardest one to come up with any notes for at all. There's some water, there's a gate. There's really just nothing about this which is remotely interesting. The trash fire continues. I can never get away from these goddamn watchdogs. It's another one, who gives a crap? I was messing around with the hyper armor and poise break potential still, so I nearly traded myself to death, but oh well, that's the most interesting thing about this fight. I'm so bored of them. Will the suffering ever end? The old Altus tunnel is a mine. Look at it. It's doing mine stuff. Exciting. Please make it stop. I swear, we're going to do something new next, I promised. But for now, I'm killing another Stone Digger troll because there is no god. This one did provide mild entertainment since I accidentally blew up a barrel while I was doing the knockdown on him, killing him in the process. As I said, mild. And finally, we're at somewhere which bloody matters. When I was playing through, I felt like the slot quota dropped off a little bit after Leonia, but man, I hated just editing that sequence of relentless crap. Anyway, the intermediate dungeon of Altus is the Shaded Woods, an unpleasant place, but a well-handled one. It's a castle sinking into a poison swamp, which obviously should set off a lot of alarm bells, but it really is really well put together. The visuals of the place melting into the filth are solid, and it has this neat layer cake design. There's an outer wall ramparts, then there's a swamp bit, and then there's an inner wall ramparts, and then another swamp bit, and then a central courtyard with towers. It's like peeling an onion with an anchor. It's all just very neat for a place which desperately wants to poison and deathblight you. Sadly, the boss is another letdown, as it's just a named copy of a common mini-boss. Admittedly one of the more significant ones, but still. Elmer Fudd here is another bell-bearing hunter. Comparatively, I think it's a little bit easier than the others statistically speaking, but the room is full of clutter to balance that out. I still suck at fighting these guys with all the input reading, awkwardly tight windows, and long, staggered attack combos, but it wasn't too bad. Mostly, I'm just annoyed that they capped off a good stage with what, like, the 5th copy of this mini-boss? Our final named wing of the overworld for this section is pretty neat. Mount Gelmir is a little reminiscent of the Sierra River in that it's an open world stage that you can take a few routes through, but it is built out of fairly narrow and locked off segments to force you into actually interacting with stuff in here a lot more. I like the Rocky Battle Remnant style of it, and it's a highlight of the overworld in all departments other than the dour quality of its minor dungeons. Things just can't stay good for long, can they? The Gelmir hero's grave is just awful. It's another chariot one, this time over slow-walking lava, and this time the chariot is unkillable, with no neat little exploit to de-obnoxify the cesspool. There is a side area which is largely just a horrendous gank, and it can be skipped fairly easily if you know the drop, but this is easily the worst hero grave, and that's saying something. So I was wrong earlier when I said that I couldn't ignore all the remaining Red Wolves. I was correct that I absolutely can't fight them, however. I got extremely carried away by the hyper armor of Lion's Claw, which nearly blew it for me, but I snuck through it with a hilariously meager 6 health left. Apparently I missed this one in my script earlier, and I'm not smart enough to edit it to go back into the right spot. So it's going in here. It's a Tibia Mariner, so, you know, if I left it out, you probably wouldn't have even noticed that it wasn't there. This one has some giant skeletons that do nothing instead of the small skeletons that do nothing. After leaving the hero's grave, I went and got kicked off the cliff by Patches for easy access to Seethwater Cave. Now this is a poison swamp cave. It's almost all poison all the way down. It's populated exclusively by mobs of dudes who shoot more poison. It's confusing, and it's lame running down all the samey looking tunnels if you want to be thorough. It's absolutely heinous, it's a worthless pile of crap, and it's devoid of joy. I guess it's fitting that one of the laziest and crappiest mini-dungeons in the entire game would have a lazy and crappy end boss. The Kindreds of Rot aren't even a pair of elites, they're a pair of regular enemies. We're just on a massive trash roll to start this one, huh? You know things are grim when I'm looking forward to a 4th round copy-paste to improve things, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I've never been more ready to repeat a magma worm. This one has some issues with the lava pit restricting your movement, but they're fairly pleasant fights, so I don't mind it that much given all of the everything in this video so far. Surprisingly, and pathetically, the boss which gave him the most trouble in this little overworld copy-paste spam segment was the demi-human queen Maggie of all things. For whatever reason, I made a real mess of getting the 3 mages she hangs around with out of the way, but she also got around my shield a lot, and she was a lot tankier than I remembered. It's more of an indictment on myself than anything else, but still. Because this playthrough has been a scatterbrained mess, instead of continuing on to fight the Gelmir Falling Star Beast, I went back to Lindell to fight a different Falling Star Beast. I don't know why I did this. I'm sorry, I hate it too. I fought him quite poorly, but he's not statted overly high, so it was still a bit of a breeze. Maybe I was just trying to get a practice run in before the big boy. After that completely incomprehensible sidetrack for no discernible reason, we're back on the Gelmir path and into the Volcano Cave. A terrible, simple, tiny cave with a bunch of demi-humans in it. These things are easier than basic hollows, so it's really pointless. Is it still a swing and a miss if they don't even try? I handled Margot a lot more neatly than Maggie, and it left me feeling nothing. Again, I performed embarrassingly poorly against another one of these phenomenally easy opponents. But there's nothing here to boost the annoyance, so it is just busy work. I think I'm just chasing the stance break too much. The Lion's Claw makes me reckless. From here, all that Gelmir has left is a couple of field bosses, with the first one being the not screwing around Falling Star Beast on the peak. I actually fought this one okay and largely found it a fairly entertaining fight because of that. I probably should have worked in the pest thread since it runs away so much, but generally I'm just getting the hang of their moveset and finding them fairly fun now, even if the range on the AoE here is annoyingly large when the terrain is so wonky. So far my ulcerated tree spirit encounters have been really clean, so I was starting to forget how annoying they can be, but this one reminded me well. I think that they may just be really susceptible to wall strikes, since sometimes they'll just let you belt them for 5 seconds straight, which is that skill's time to shine. While the more commitment heavy Lion's Claw and charge attacks can miss a lot when it doesn't sit still, which this one didn't, because it was a jerk. With Gelmir all sorted for now, I ducked into the sealed tunnel to grab the second bell bearing and begin the arduous process of grinding through even more vapid map filler garbage. Thankfully, this place is actually a pretty decent mix of things. It has 3 different enemy types, there are hidden walls all over, there's drops and narrow path crossings with natural overgrowth bursting through the walls, which is somewhat interesting to look at. There's even a loot statue for an abductor to smash up. It's not amazing or anything, but it's a lot better than most of the absolute dumpster fires we've been exposed to in Altus. Sadly, this minor highlight has an embarrassingly poor boss to close it out. We're copy-pasting a not a boss yet again with another Onyx Lord, something which was an underwhelming joke even before we'd killed 8 of them. This one isn't purple like the others, which makes him maybe special, but you wouldn't know for how weak he is. My first stop in clearing out the rest of Altus was the Windmill Village, which I don't think has enough actual level design to count as an intermediate dungeon, despite it passing the other criteria I set out with it having a name, multiple bonfires, and a boss. It just doesn't feel right. Anyway, the boss is our first Godskin Apostle, and I think these guys are easier than the chunky boys, but they're still weird and really look like they should stagger a lot more than they do. I don't love them, but I think they're alright. Godfrey just chilling out in some random Everjail is a silly, if not outright stupid repeat for sure, but Godric was a really good fight, so I'm going to take this lazy spam over fighting another NPC or basic elite with a health bar any day. This version is clearly lesser without the phase change and the less cool blue aesthetics, but phase 1 of this fight is still among the best things we'll ever see in one of these things. After all the souped up deathbirds we've been doing, there's a normal deathbird in Lindale for some reason. There's already a mini-boss in this exact spot, so I don't see the point. It's like all the other ones. It's annoying, but it is susceptible to sacred lasers. It's filler. The Eruzia side tomb is our first Mindscrew catacombs, and I quite like it. It's a teleporter maze with the added twist in that you're teleporting through different copies of an almost identical catacombs. So it's a journey of noticing little differences. It is confusing, but it's also interesting, and it actually isn't really that complex in reality, just enough to do your head in a bit. Obviously, the looks are played out, but I'm giving them the aesthetics points for having the boldness to include fake corpses to really try and sell the illusion. The pots. They do nothing. I finally figured out a strategy for the Grave Wardens with the guard counters on the second hits to break those long combos, so this was less brute forcey than the prior efforts, but they are still easy enough to brute force at any rate if you want to. The pots genuinely may well as not be here. They do nothing at all. Just around the corner from there is a hero's grave which has caused me much fear in the lead up to this point. The grave itself is nothing to fret about. It has more chariots than you can poke a stick at, but that means you can make them run into each other, which is cool. This one has the funny quirk that you can trigger the trap which kills them remotely with an item, and avoid doing some fairly generic dungeon diving. A mild quirk for a mild location. The issue is what waits at the end. Duo Crucible Knights. That's what's waiting at the end. Duo Crucible Knights. Whoever came up with this idea is sadistic, but to my surprise I actually pulled this one off without ashes, admittedly with a lot of effort though. It came down to the wire a few times before finally pinching the win, with one devastating attempt being one hit away with heals remaining, but I got there. As one would expect, it's quite an irritating fight, with it largely being a question of whether you can bring down Spear Bro with enough heals to handle the shield and tail one afterwards. They actually pair up a little bit due to them having different levels of aggression, but you still do need to pull them apart to utilize that period of manageability. Moments where they overlap are fairly easy to avoid and rare, but it is really tedious kiting them around the arena the whole time. My progression order here continues to be wonky as hell, since I now left the lead up to the main Legacy dungeon to visit the Foggy Forest area in central Altus for some reason. The Erdtree boss here is a worm face. It's literally the only time that they do this. They're hard as hell in Farum, but they're just goofy elites here. They could theoretically death you, but just don't stand in vomit. Problem solved. Given I've been so thorough this playthrough, the Altus Tunnel's surplus of smithing 5s really wasn't necessary for me. I guess the boss gives a bell bearing, but it's an early somber one, so unless you upgrade 25 somber weapons, you're literally never going to need any of these. Outside of that, it's a pretty basic cave. The guards watching the miners are now flying puppet dudes, and there's also a blast cannon monster, but he's actually part of another connected mini-dungeon. Those are X factors. Caves blow. Speaking of blowing, here are 2 more Crystallians. 2 of them is not enough to make the break and slaughter process very interesting, but it limits how obnoxious it is to get it also. It really is just the usual copy-paste resentment and boredom and nothing else here. Altus is a really big fan of heroes' graves for reasons I cannot understand, and this one has a door guard for another reason I cannot understand. It's a Black Knife Assassin, for some reason that I cannot understand. This one doesn't go invisible, but it does go flat when pancaked. Well, I'll be damned. We've got a hero's grave that isn't based on chariots. The Sainted Hero's Grave is all about magic light fields which make shadow enemies physical, and I actually find it pretty fun. It's definitely a simple and not overly creative idea, but kiting the duelist through half the level to make him corporeal so I could open the door was an enjoyable time. Obviously, a new idea for a dungeon deserves a fittingly fresh boss. So we didn't get that, so here's another ancient hero of Zamor. I guess they haven't been crazily overspammed, so they're not that old yet, but they really are just an elite with a health bar. Living just outside that hero's grave is a lightning dragon named Lanciax. He's quite the spectacle to all the lightning, and he doesn't jump around too much, making him something that you could actually approach with a melee and have a decent time. Honestly, I find them easier than the regular flying around all the time dragons, and that's a good thing, because I wasn't chasing them around all fight. This is a good one. I wish they spammed these ones instead. All that's left now for the Altus overworld is to look up where the hell the entrance to that other little cave that connects to the Altus tunnel is. I wish I didn't bother and pretended like it didn't exist, because the Perfumer's Grotto is some absolute slop. It's a very basic cave layout with some perfumers and a couple of plants, with the rock monster being really the only thing of note. Sadly, said blast cannon monster is still hanging over a gap even when approaching from this side, so I resorted to bows for the first time all run just to avoid fighting him on a branch. Fittingly, our send-off to the absolute travesty exhibition that is the Altus overworld crap is 2 of the easiest quasi-elites in a big room. This one is laughable as long as you don't fight the Omen Killer in Flower Bloom Laser Age. Good riddance to this trash. I did forget one bell-bearing hunter, but he'll be in the video at some point, so there's no need to time travel him in. Instead, I went to open up the capital by taking down the Draconic Tree Sentinel, the beefier, less fun version of the Tree Sentinels. I'm indifferent to negative towards the stockier, uglier style change, but it is enough that at least not call him a straight reskin. Fight-wise, I find this version extremely annoying. All of his chill-out breaks are almost exactly the length of a flask or a charged R2, and he doesn't miss all the time like the normal ones, so I just keep getting tagged after almost every action I take. Overall, this was quite a scrappy, unenjoyable, but not too hard fight. With all the busy work down, it's finally time for Legacy Dungeon 3, and Lindell is just the best level in the series. I'm fully aware that it's incredibly silly that the giant, multi-hour, glorious mega dungeon is held to the same scoring potential as the goddamn Perfumer's Grotto, but we've got to do what we got to do. Obviously, they do not cancel each other out in reality. Thanks Miyazaki for ruining my comparison system. Jerk. I know I've said it a bunch of times across this series, but there's no hyperbole here. This is the best level they've made, and it's not even particularly close. I was a little bit overpowered after doing basically everything available to me, but even with no real threat, this place is an achievement of the highest order. It's so big and complex, and with about 8 different subzones within it, yet it all flows perfectly. It's almost completely open, yet every sequence is a contained and intentional challenge. I came through here in a completely different way than I ever have, and I wasn't even trying to. It's just that every segment links to 3 other segments, and you can pick and choose however you like, and they'll all join back together somewhere else, and it's just wonderful. It's a top 3 level in anything ever for me, with only a couple of Dishonored 2 stages pushing it. Our sneak peek at an end boss was fairly easy, but he has put the fear of God into me for the real thing, because I sucked super bad here. The P-filter ghost mode he's got going on makes Godfrey feel pretty lame for now, but at least it means that he's not cutting the drama of round 2 later on, since he's almost unrecognisable. He's got weird delays, and the combos just keep going even though every hit explodes like it's a string-ending set piece. I'm gonna have to do some learning in future. I've done 100% Elden Ring runs before, but this is the first time I've understood the Margot is undertuned complaint. He's in a tough spot in the game. In my first playthrough where I didn't find the underground segments and hit him with like 30 vigor and a level 15 weapon, I found him brutal. But this time around, I just belted the living crap out of him. I'm not sure how you're meant to balance around such a wide power differential possibility. In this case, I wanted the fight to go on for another minute or two, since I think his new sword and AoE options add a lot of variety and flair to the fairly rote and mechanically stringent Margit fight. After such a triumphant end to the mid-game, I'm not sure why Lindell needed an irrelevant joke double elite nothing fight as a send-off to the greatest level we've seen all series. But here we are. The Twin Omens are predictably dull, given you've probably already fought a beefed up version of this down in the Shunning Grounds as regular enemies. This garbage is some kind of compulsion to them. The late game kicks off with the Forbidden Lands, which is basically just a road to the late game. It looks really good with all the snow and fog and the giant skulls all over the place, but there's nothing here. There's all these elevation changes and details on the map creating hundreds of fancy little nooks and crannies to explore, and there's literally nothing in any of them. I get it's a connecting zone, but it blue-balled me pretty hard. Of course, when I say nothing, I mean that there's a couple of goddamn spam bosses. Actually making this list has shocked me because in real time these things are such afterthoughts that it feels like there's less side crap in the late game, but the later game actually has more slop fights than in the early game. They're just so played out that I stopped even registering their existence at this stage. I will never forgive Elden Ring for making me resent these badasses because I genuinely hate seeing them now. Speaking of things I genuinely hate, here's another spindly-legged giant gargoyle, and it's obnoxious as usual. That mix of speed, range, and being hard to hit is just unpleasant, and I would like it if they stopped showing up now. We've done the 45-second entrance hallway to the mountaintops, and we've already fought 3 spam bosses. This is silly. Thankfully, that trip towards the mountaintops was a mere ruse, so I get to go somewhere good instead. With all the quests wrapped up, I can finally clear out the Volcano Manor, an absolutely phenomenally dense and interesting place to explore and open up. I love the Snake Men as enemies. It's just so very varied with several distinct segments which cut back and forth together. I love the multiple methods of entry, and that it can be skipped if you never want to do it. It doesn't have the scale to go with Lindell, but it's probably my second favourite place in the game regardless. Beyond being kinda small, the big downside of the Volcano Manor is that it has a Godskin noble in it. I don't mind the skinny Godskin, but I despise the fatty. He's got a horrible mix of incredibly fast attacks, insane range, input reading, and looking like he's not doing anything half the time. He just begs to be bopped every chance you get, and then he'll do a quick poke and he'll do it a billion times or do the big fat belly move that comes out in about 3 frames. These guys are the worst. Thankfully, the other boss here is a big improvement. Rykard is a spectacle of the highest order, for better or worse. It's a Storm Ruler fight, which obviously means you're going to be spamming at range, but Rykard throws so much stuff at you that it isn't a cakewalk. I love how absolutely insane it gets with all the skulls and fireballs and explosions, but it is pretty overwhelming, and with his weird delayed timing it can be a bit much when there's all this other stuff going on. That ground contact delay on his second swing and his basic combo, and how slow he brings down the Ultra Beam after he trigger moves for it, got me all the time. I also find it really annoying that the lava staggers, since he keeps interrupting my charged R2s without even doing an attack. So here's the last bell-bearing hunter that I missed earlier. I still can't fight them worth a damn, and at this point I think I just have to accept that I never will. I'm not even sure what throws me off so bad. The regain slam didn't do great either. At any rate, the repeat penalties are starting to stack up on these fellows now. Thankfully, I think it is the last one. Thankfully, that opening 20 minutes of abject suffering we started the video with means we get to more or less jump from one real place to another one. It's wild that I hid somewhere this big and significant in a well in the middle of an already the biggest dungeon in the series. The subterranean Shunning Grounds are great, I reckon. I see a lot of people complaining about the pipe sequence, but I think that it's short enough that it never really got to me. I don't like them as bosses, but I do like fighting omens, and they are the main enemy here. There's a heap of shortcuts and loops, the Dung Eater quest plays out here, and there's a huge variety in sublocales. There's the upper pipe sequence, the catacombs area which doesn't have a title card so it's not being separated, and is one of the best catacombs in the game, and the sewer sequence, and then on top of that, there's also the drop sequence down to the frenzied flame. There's a lot of gravity stuff which can be a bit annoying, but it's a good spot. The boss of the catacombs portion is pretty straightforward, provided that you can get things to a balanced and well-organized state. Esgar is a regular NPC with a bunch of bleed attacks and supported by 2 bleed dogs. So the fight really is about clearing out the dogs and getting to the point that you're not on the cusp of being bled to death. Once you hit that moment, he's a total joke. I had some dicey moments getting there, but it really is something of a nothing encounter. Finally, like 60 sections after we already covered up grown-up Moog, we get to cover the weaker, earlier version. I probably shouldn't have bought a fire weapon to a dude with massive fire resist, so I was only getting like 300 damage per swing. On the plus side, it does mean the fight lasted long enough for me to kinda understand his little fake-out swing in the second hit of his combo. This was pretty poor form, and thankfully the real deal went a lot more smoothly. One of the main issues I have with him is that I don't know how to tell which quick throw move is which. They all look the same to me, which is obviously not a good sign given he has like 6 different blood flame throw moves. At any rate, it was a horrible mess, but now he's dead. I didn't even record this guy in my notes and script because he was so forgettable. I only discovered I missed putting him in here when I was going through my footage looking for other things, so I actually fought the Sanguine Noble a lot earlier than this. I like his drip, I think I wore it for a decent chunk of time, but otherwise he's so forgettable that I didn't even write him down. Sadly, we're out of good things to do again, so we're off to the annoying and lengthy Mountaintops catacombs. They reused the similar clone layout gimmick of the Lindell one, which obviously steals its thunder, and aside from that, it's just more catacombs. I'm giving it a negative tilt point for the staff watchdog in the secret area because it's probably the most poorly designed enemy I've ever seen. It spams its AoE attack endlessly, like it will literally do nothing else for straight minutes. I have no idea how you're meant to fight it melee. It sucks ass. It wouldn't be a new region without immediately running into a tree spirit, would it? This one jumped around a little bit more, so I had less fun with it than the last few, but hey, easy runes. We're not even close to done with these guys, but I think that it may be the last one with a health bar that I need to cover here. And now it's time to check out the Mountaintops proper, and there's bugger all to cover really. This place is almost as big as Limgrave, yet it's home to just 2 mini dungeons, 2 field bosses, an ever jail, and a major fort. That's really it. The rest is basically worthless space. It actually has a fairly decent layout. There's a lot of bridges and valleys to make for quite an intricate place at times as you crisscross around, but the loot here is underleveled and there's so little to find that it's not very rewarding to explore. Having visibility in the lake area is nice, so I took down the dragon first. Borealis is an annoying one. It flies around a heap and it has a very obnoxious AoE which stagger locks you so you can't escape. On the plus side, it is super susceptible to rot, and it is a unique variant which is always nice, but by and large, it's a dragon and it takes away visibility. Roundtable Knight Vike is a people, so it's back to the anchor for pancake time. Apparently, he can be a pain with all of his lightning nonsense, but with the anchor there's no time for that. I think he's pretty simple, but my weapon choice definitely was a factor. I still think he's nothing to worry about really. Astoundingly, we're already at our final mini dungeon of the region. Spirit Caller Cave is a very simple and short cave which eschews map complexity for a silly little enemy gimmick. Along its straight path are snails that keep summoning enemies until you smack them up, resulting in a stealth and or rush structure. It can be pretty obnoxious if you don't know where they are, and it's an absolute joke if you do. I'm not even sure if there's a fun middle ground anywhere in between those, but I don't mind it. This back-to-back Godskin Gauntlet confirmed that I'm better at Noodle Godskin than Chungus Godskin. Nobles are such an obnoxious, terrible fight that it draws down any appeal that comes from the Apostle, and the snail isn't fun enough to execute for its crimes to provide catharsis. At least it's not both at once. Can you imagine? That'd be such a stupid idea. Surprisingly, the Tibia Mariner up here doesn't have a boss bar. I'm not exactly sure why. It's not any easier than any of the prior ones, as in to say it's extremely easy. So the only overworld boss to deal with on the western side is the Deathrite Bird. We're at the point where these things can easily two-shot you regardless of stats, so I just Sacred Blade cheesed it and I regret nothing. Just quietly, I had been worried about this Earth Tree avatar and its split in 2 powers. I mean, it's 2 of them, and they have the potential to overlap with incredibly unpleasant, lethal moves. Thankfully, their strength added up as a weakness as they were built to be cheesed senseless with the Blasphemous Blade. They light up in a row and gave me double procs on every weapon art usage, and it was really quite funny. Given literally everything we've seen in this region has been repeated content with tiny modifiers, it's a relief to say that we're already off to a major fort. Of all the major forts in Elden Ring, I think Castle Souls holds up the least on repeat visits. I'm not sure what about it hasn't kept the appeal for me, but I thought this place was incredible on my first playthrough, and every time since, it's been thoroughly mid. I like the look of it, and there are shortcuts and loops all over, but I don't know, it just never gets me overly enthused anymore. Maybe it's just because the loot is bad and there's so many ladders which make it fairly dry? Or it could just be how it only has one thing going on the entire time, but that's true of Castle Redmane too, and I still like that. It's not awful or anything, but it just doesn't do it for me. What does do it for me, however, is Commander Nile. I've never actually fought him without summons because by this stage I've always been well and truly submitted to the call of the Mimic, but actually taking him on somewhat properly was a lot of fun. Obviously, I still charm the ads because of course I did, and the Blasphemous Blade absolutely is easy mode for this, but I'm not sure I would have had as much fun without it. He has so many crazy AoEs, and most of his windups have an AoE portion, so with Taker's Flame, those became windows if I effectively gained space quickly enough, giving the bout a fun tempo that I imagine pure melee would not have. He's very flashy, kinda weird with his timings, and has the aforementioned array of AoEs, but he takes a lot of time between volleys, so he's unlikely to overwhelm too quickly. I had a bunch of fun with him, really. Since there's really nothing in the mountaintops of giants, we're already off to the other named wing, Flame Peak. This is the portion of the mountaintops that everyone lost their crap over, since it is just a big snowy mountain with a billion very unpleasant and very destructive enemies. Much like the main body of the area, there's bugger all here, there's a hero's tomb, and that's literally it. Everyone just rushes through on their horse, and for good reason. Again, the loot is underleveled. We should be getting more smithing 8s when you can have multiple maxed out somber weapons and summons at this point, but we're still capped 2 levels down for regular weapons. Literally the only thing up here which isn't just mobs from hell everywhere is another light up shadow enemy's hero's grave, but I find those pretty fun, so I'm not really complaining. The giant conquering's hero's grave elevates it a tiny bit with a little bit of puzzle solving with moving the lights around, but it's all pretty breezy and easy, and all the cats are non-staff jerks. It's perfectly fine. I think that this hero of Zamor is actually easier than the regular enemy ones at the very start of the mountaintops. Maybe it's just because there's only one of them, but even 1-to-1 I think it's pretty even. We've fought a fair few of these guys now. They stagger a little inconsistently, which can force mistakes. Sometimes they collapse from a stiff breeze, other times they'll power on through your strongest attacks and frostbite you with a 6-hit combo. I don't know, I can't really read it or understand, but who cares? It's a normal enemy. The Fire Giant is the moment where my endgame killer build became a little sparkle in my eye. This was my first time testing out a quick status proc weapon paired with a main damage dealer, and I've got to say, wild success. I brought along a cold Antspur rapier to try and trigger Rotten Frost before swapping over to the anchor, and even with it only at plus 18, that rapier tore this guy the hell up. The only dicey moment was an unfortunate placement of an invisible wall which prevented my escape from the giant ball explosions, but otherwise, I couldn't be happier. If anything, no summons is easier since he rolls around less as he isn't chasing other guys around the arena. To avoid any danger of having my playthrough not appear like a random mess, I decided to duck through the hidden path to the Haligtree before doing Furumazula, and again, I have no idea why I did this whatsoever. I'm sorry, I hate it too. As for the hidden path itself, it's basically a very simple catacombs with some invisible paths in it. It's lame. So I broke my no ashes rule for the Stray Mimic tier boss for obvious reasons. Mimic Fight Club is the highlight of this area, and the game in general. I'm a little bit disappointed that they didn't try to use any of the spells I had on them for a little variety, but it's fun watching them throw down. My Mimic pulled through with the win. Legend. So obviously, after leaving Furumazula to start the trek into the consecrated snowfield, I immediately turned around and went back to Furumazula instead. I don't even know what I'm doing. This is such a stupidly structured run. Much like Castle Sol, Furumazula is the legacy dungeon that is held up the least with repeat visits. Don't get me wrong, it's still excellent, it looks incredible, some of the enemies are fun, and while the threat of gravity is never welcome, it is interesting hopping around this floating, crumbling city. The shortcomings are that it's definitely the most single-tracked and grace-spammy level in the whole game. There are a couple of optional areas and some rooms with multiple access points, but by and large it's fairly linear compared to the others, and I don't feel like I'm uncovering new things every time I go through it. Well, I'll be damned. I thought the Godskin duo was going to be a nightmare, but honestly, it wasn't that bad. It's more boring than outright difficult, really. since you can't really take the fight to them, so it becomes a fairly unexciting but simple process of kiting them around and stealing cheap hits. My attempts at offhand status abuse weren't overly effective, since it seems like the sleep from Trina's sword lasts like 4 seconds, but at least wasting my MP there meant that I couldn't resort to spamming Taker's Flame, which absolutely would make this a breeze. It's still not good, obviously, this is a blatantly stupid boss idea, but it's much more easily managed than I'd feared. Placidus Axe is another one that I've never ever fought solo, and even though I don't think it mechanically changes much due to his size and relatively limited mobility, I regret it because this fight is fantastic. It's a fight largely about getting into the Bloodborne position and keeping out of the way of all of his frontal carnage, mixed with a lot of him warping around and AoE spamming to force you out of the way, making you have to get back into that position several times. My Rotfrost Rapier was again the MVP, even with his high status resistance. It may just be because Phase 1 has less warping, but I was outputting more straight DPS with that than I was with my main weapon. Overall, it's an amazing spectacle that keeps the pace up, and it went down to the wire. Sadly, after that masterful fight, fun has to go die now because we're off to the frigid outskirts of Elden Ring. To be fair, only half of it is running around in zero visibility while insanely destructive mounted archers 3-shot you, but that's more than enough. The rest of this is more of those mounted archers, but now you can see them, a town with invisible assassins, a mausoleum that shoots you now, and just general empty garbageness. It's horrendous. While most of the area is empty and worthless, there is a catacombs in the fog, and it's kind of meh, but it is funny. This one is all about breath tower manipulation, which is a fairly slow and cumbersome gimmick, but you can use it to kill a lot of enemies, most satisfyingly, a staff cat. So that's nice. So, I forgot to hit record after this one, and I'm not playing all the way up to here again so you can see a catacombs boss, so here's a random one in a field which is pretty much the same fight. It's a Grave Warden duelist with an axe. We've seen them before, it doesn't even attack fast because it has an axe. It's a guard counter city joke. The Forlorn Cave is mechanically just a lame cave full of misbegotten, so I should hate it, but it's got some neat visual style into it with the see-through icy floor and the jellyfish room. It's literally just pretty, but hey, that's too high a bar for most mini-dungeons, and it's enough for me. It turns out that all the misbegotten spam in the cave was forewarning because for some reason they're still using these normal-ass enemies as bosses this far into the game. This one has a big shiny sword and does a surprisingly intense amount of damage, but, you know, it's a misbegotten. Who gives a crap? Just around the corner from that cave is Theodore the Magma Worm. He's much beefier than the others and does some pretty crazy damage. He almost one-shot me at 59 Vigor, Defense Bubble Tier, Level 2 Defense Talisman, and I think that I still had Golden Vow active. On the other hand, he rots, he freezes, he bleeds, so he got the Moog weapon treatment. The only other thing over this side is another toxic avatar. This one is, as you would expect, quite hard-hitting, but he's also very squishy. I think this is the least hits any of them have taken all game. It should be noted that there is a death cliff in the arena, so running away from the rotting butt stomp can get you. Well, it got me anyway. Finally, we are at our very last main game mini-dungeon, and to its credit, this one does a little bit to save their terrible strike rate in this video. These things got old 40 hours ago, and they weren't any good to start with, so I'm very glad to see the end of them. The Yellow Annex Tunnel is a cruddy mining cave with an alright frozen look, but the prior one did it better with the see-through floor. There's some Onyx Lords as a standard enemy for the first time, and there's actually an honest-to-God shortcut for once. And the Ancient Smithing Stone is nice. Still pretty bleh overall, but by the standards that have been set, this is amazing. Why is there a second Astel sitting in a random cave in a random snowfield? No idea. I don't like it. If there was something to leave unique, it was Astel, so this one does kind of annoy me, and I'll be arcing it fairly harshly. All I have to say about the fight itself is Lion's Claw. This one was high on my list for potential problems due to the whole hard to hit and teleporting one-shot thing, but Lion's Claw. It only got to warp once, and it chose the Meteor spam instead of the clones or the grab, which is a bad move, because Lion's Claw. Lion's Claw. We are so close to the end of the slop, so let's keep on churning through to the Duo Knights Cavalry. This pair is even easier to keep separate than the Duo Tree Sentinels, thus completely removing their one point of distinction. These guys lost their appeal a long time ago, they're old, there are two of them in vaguely the same area, nothing to add. It's over. It's finally over. Our last piece of spam for the whole base game. This is our last deathbird, and I've managed to basically not fight any of them. I don't regret this at all, since I remember this one killing me like 50 times in the past. It has insane damage, which goes absolutely terrible with all the flying around, the spells, the AoEs, the crazy rangy flailing. So I skipped all that with Sacred Blade, and now I can go have some actual damn fun. Finally, we're done with the overworld garbage and can head into the final legacy dungeon. The Haligtree consists of 3 main areas. The first 2 come under the Michaela's Haligtree banner. Sadly, they're quite annoying. Don't get me wrong, they're cool, but climbing and jumping and fighting on root systems over a deathfall is terrible. All the enemies here are old, but I like the Bulba Rose, even if this is the worst conceivable place to ever fight them. The second portion isn't as memorable, and I'm very bored of Misbegotten at this point, but the Tree Trop Village thing is a neat look. It also suffers from the Furuma Zula setup in that it feels like that has a very obvious core critical path and only minor loot divergences, even if that elevator to the boss shortcut is an excellent use of looping. The boss here is technically a repeat, but it's been like 70 hours between encounters and this version is much better, so a lot like the Commander Nile fight, I think it's enough of an upgrade and delay to avoid much repeat penalty. Corporeal Renala can pack a punch which can surprise you if you eat a direct hit or two, but like all mounted enemies, she is guard counter bait, while Taker's Flame let me heal back chip damage on each stagger. I find this fight pretty pleasant. Thankfully, the second portion of the dungeon is much better, even if it does still suffer from being entirely repeated enemies. The castle portion is a fantastic segment with a high path, a low path, and a back route with all sorts of crisscrossing potential, which all coalesces into a single set piece with heaps of nonsense going on in there, which makes your method of approach super important. This section in particular is one of my favourite segments of the entire game. After that, the Rot Swamp area is pretty lame with little there aside from a tree spirit which will knock you off the thin cliff if you don't spend the whole fight rotted. This is followed by a very unpleasant 4-on-2 ending to an NPC questline if you're not a sadistic monster. The final church courtyard area is fine, I guess. I kinda wish there wasn't a Grace near Melania, and they just went with the Stake of Marika, since the shortcut next to it would have been one of the most impressive ones in the entire game if it ever actually had a reason to be used. Ever. I get that it's a fight that you're going to want to prepare for, but come on, the shortcut. Respect the shortcut. I hadn't actually been fearing Melania for this run, simply because I didn't think that I'd get to her, so I came here with no real expectations. As someone who hasn't minded her with a Mimic Buddy in the past, without a Mimic Buddy, she is my new worst enemy. Melania is too hard. I don't care about my gamer ego, she is too damn hard. Am I mad because bad? Yep, sure am. I don't care. She's absolutely ridiculous and my new worst experience I've ever had in one of these games. I tried her for 4 straight hours. I gave up, then went and made some broken Executioner Sword stagger build I saw online, and that also didn't work, which just tilted me harder. In hindsight, I never actually tried to ignore the regain and trust in the boss killer, since I assumed it wouldn't work, but I'm not coming back here to try. She doesn't score that badly because of the system, but I hate her. It's hard to pinpoint one thing that's so awful about her. It's just that she has so many little get-screwed quirks piled on top of one another that it gets completely unreasonable for me to have any fun whatsoever. She has too many moves that look too similar to one another, and they chain in so many ways based on position or RNG to brute force it through broad tactics. Stance break progress is way too essential for the fight for it to not be visually represented to the player. There's too many specific defensive input requirements for moves that can one-combo you. She heals on hit, so you can't block any of it. Waterfowl dance is absolute nonsense. I've had years of seeing people dodge it online now, and I sure as hell can't do it. I guess I take a quarter of a second too long to start running, or I'm too close at the start because of course I am. I need to stagger lock her or she'll get all her health back since she does endless 27 move combos at mid-range. The fight just asks way beyond what I'm capable of having a good time providing. I'm just not going to be able to understand this many moves this quickly to have the correct response for them all. I'm just not. It's beyond me. You could have a few of these and I could still have fun, but all of it together is just way too much. I hate her. She's the worst boss. I don't care if she's fun once you've learned the specific counters to all 83 of her moves and never get them wrong. I can't, so I have no fun. None. Zero. So, anyway, I respec into this Bull Goat Moog Spear thing and I didn't have to actually fight her. This is probably more of a fight skipper than actually just using Mimic in reality, but technically, the No Ashes run lives, and I don't feel like I missed any grand moment of joy. If I took 12 hours to Beardo properly, my reaction would be a bitter and exhausted, thank God that's over. Not elation. I actually can understand why people who can handle her like her. There's parts of her kit that I would enjoy if it wasn't all of it together. There's a lot of punish and heal windows, usually ones that you need to make by creating a really nice tempo when she's not chaining her clones and waterfowl. There's a nice mix of quick instinct combat dodging and big showpiece moves requiring admittedly stupid levels of specific response. Just with the massive health regeneration, you can't really get hit and you can't block, so the margin for error becomes so minuscule that all the fun dies. Completely. It is profoundly dead, non-existent fun. Following up that dose of not fun is another dose of maybe even worse not fun. This is a tale of two halves. The Beast Clergyman is a relentless physical beast which leaves almost zero in the way of natural windows and demands that you attack him while he's still active but missing. Or you can just use a Great Shield since all of his attacks are purely physical and he does very little stamina damage. I don't love him since he's so stupidly relentless and is decidedly unfun with many builds, but he's alright on his own. Malekith, on the other hand, is similarly relentless, but is built entirely around constantly jumping around, AoEs, range slashes, and attacks which completely ignore shields. It's an absolute nightmare balanced out by the fact that it has Pinwheel-esque HP. There's still next to nothing in regards to natural windows between attacks, but with how far he moves between every swing, it's much harder and slower to pinch hits. Yet your heal windows are extremely tight due to the whole never taking a break thing. The main issue for me, however, is his insane lethality. With 60 Vigor, the armor tier, Golden Vow, and top level armor talisman, everything he did was a 2-shot or at best slightly under. He also has an annoying damage over time thing, where you'll die 4 seconds after you get hit that you can't prevent because there's no time to panic heal between his relentless attacking. As I've said all series, I hate moves which have a delay between getting hit and inevitably dying from it, and this is kind of all of his attacks. It results in a fight that requires perfect understanding since it's so hard to recover from damage, but also makes that learning process absolutely insufferable since you'll only be in the fight for 12 seconds before you die. Honestly, the moveset seems fairly fun, but I can't bloody see it before I have to go back and do phase 1 again after a walkback that's longer than the actual fight portion. It's horrendously unpleasant. The one relief that makes him more manageable than Melania is that he dies in like 5 good hits. As such, all I really had to learn was that there's a nice window for charged I2s off his scripted first combo since he misses if you're up close, and that most of his explosions go forward, so if you wind up behind him after a slam, you're usually safe to get a hit off even if it looks like a bad idea. Doing one of each of those was enough for my anchor to get the kill damage. This was after like 12 tries, and that's all I'd been able to learn because the lethality is so damn high. And finally, after like an hour, that's our first zone of the video completely done. This is obviously the most abstracted zone we've covered this far, given it features not 1 but 2 legacy dungeons that aren't physically connected to it, but they're not really going to fit anywhere else. Obviously, this gives the region a bit of a leg up in the level portion, but honestly, the big win is that it's being fairly lazy on the mini dungeons, so there's not a whole lot of garbage to bring it down too far even when we're including them. They still drag it down a little bit, but not enough to bring it down to a red total like the other later zones. Unfortunately, this relief did not come across to the boss side of the equation. God damn, that is a lot of red. I've been more or less dropping a point or two from each boss reuse to reflect my increasing disinterest and distaste of them as they keep showing up, and being the last chunk of the open world means that all the repeated crap is in its absolutely lowest possible scoring phase, and yeah, they're still spamming them away anyway. It's actually less annoying than Altus because at least it's fairly sparse and empty, but goddamn, that is a lot of red. This stage of the game has basically single-handedly tanked the entire game's scoring. On the topic of tanking the overall score, I guess it's time to finish off Altus, and the base game, a place which is actually doing even worse. Obviously, after you burn down a giant tree overlooking a city, the whole place ends up drowned in ash. I'm not sure whether I should call this an area or not, given it is technically just a rejig of Lindell, but it took me like 15 minutes to explore around for like 6 pieces of loot, most of which was trash, so I'm bitter. There's a gargoyle to fight, a few tree spirits if you come in from the Forbidden Woods. There's just a whole lot of walking. It can be interesting to see what's still open and what's buried, but it's quite dry and not worth the minutes and minutes of travel time. Old boy Gideon's value is going to come down to how much attention you've paid to the story so far. If you've done a lot, you'll be aware that Gideon is a jerk, and therefore you'll gain a lot out of belting his stupid jerk face in. If not, he's just an NPC, which is a bit of a joke. He actually can pump out some very nasty damage if you don't just body him, because, it's late game Elden Ring and damage is stupid, but you are just going to body him. The beefcake waiting behind the nerd was really fun. Admittedly, my build was absolutely busted for it given my ridiculous physical resistances and the status explosion, but he's a super entertaining dude. He is very weirdly delayed and hard to read. I can't time the jumps on all his explosions in the slightest, all of which sounds like it should be bad, but with the 40% physical damage reduction I've got, they're very tankable, and getting thrown around is just funny. The intensity is high, he's silly, but the damage is reasonable enough that you can kind of roll with it and just have fun. I've never fought him without a summon, and now I'll never fight him with a buddy ever again because he's just great. What isn't great is the Radagon Elden Beast fight to end the game. If Elden Beast wasn't such a sack of moldy balls, I've at least said that I loved Radagon thanks to all his flash and the fight feeling really good when it goes well, but I actually got worse at him with time and started to hate more and more of what he can do as I had more nightmare bouts with him, and or just got extremely bored of beating the same boss over and over. He's a lot of delays, teleports, and similar looking tells, and he has the potential to go nuts and chain a lot of attacks together randomly. When you fought him like 30 times in a row and you aren't really fully thinking about him, it gets real messy real fast, and it's extremely annoying. Sadly, there is nothing fun about the Elden Beast. This sentient pea-filled dinger is barely less terrible with the horse since you basically can't dodge anything while mounted. I guess From weren't lying when they said they didn't build him with the horse in mind. They just made a terrible boss all on their own. In my kill, he was very kind and didn't teleport away too much or double stack his crazy god magic. But he is devoid of quality, and the tedium of chasing him around and dealing with the basically undodgeable magic is insufferable. This is the poster child for running away and offering zero uptime and fun. He's the worst way to end a game imaginable, and I will never, ever fight him ash-free ever again in my entire life because he is absolutely one of the worst bosses ever made. But with that, that's an ash-free run complete. I didn't think I'd be able to do it, and indeed, I did cheese Melania, and Malakath was also borderline a skip, but I am technically victorious in my goal. I don't know if I'll want to continue that into the DLC because it's so much harder again. I guess we'll see how we go, but I was already right on the edge. I'll still give things a fair crack so I can rate them properly, but I'm not going to struggle against stuff for hours again. I guess before we get too much into overall thoughts, I suppose that we should quickly look in at the Altus zone in isolation. It's not good, despite housing a bunch of the best stuff in the game. There's that one cave near the start where you get the level 2 bell bearing, and from that exact point onwards, there is never anything else worth getting from a single mini dungeon for the rest of the game. So usually I skip a bunch of the crap up here, but good god, there is so much crap up here. This place has two of my favourite levels in the entire game, along with arguably the best major fort, and it loses 19 points overall on levels alone. There's just so many completely worthless and terrible mini dungeons with so much copy-paste spam. There are more bosses, just here, than any full game From has ever made, aside from Bloodborne if you count all of the chalices. And they're almost entirely repeats. This was by far the most unpleasant sequence of actually playing the game that I had. It was just a joyless slog for hours. I really like the art style, but the content here is the absolute nadir. The quality is there, but it's drowning in utter garbage. But anyway, let's finish up with some overall thoughts of the game as a whole so far. There's definitely a few winners from the no summon rules. Hoaraloo and Mo in particular stand out as new big favourites, but a lot of the bosses were exactly as terrible as I thought they'd be. My thoughts haven't changed much from after all my other playthroughs. I really enjoy the early game when you're out gathering upgrades and gaining power, but once they all kind of cap out, all the side crap becomes exhausting because it's all horrible and it sucks. The main dungeons continue to be the highlight, and I'd absolutely would have loved the game more if it had been just all the main levels bolted together like usual, because they really did nail the big dungeons with a consistency and scale that they've never touched on before. Beyond just being insanely well designed, the other thing I really like about these dungeons is that they haven't gotten away trying to make the general levels super hard. Across the entire series, I'd have to say that the stages have maintained a fairly steady, moderate difficulty, and it hasn't really blown out over repeat entries. This is not true of the bosses. I'm going to do a follow-up video on that topic, so I'm not going to go into it for too much just now, But in short, they are pretty damn hard hitting while asking a lot more of you mechanically, which is a combo which gets in the way of fun for me. I especially don't like that there's not many ways to lessen the difficulty and still engage with the fights like usual. Everything is still going to two-shot you or one-combo you with maximum health investment, which is something that's new to Elden Ring. Instead, you're given easy methods for completely breaking the bosses and effectively skipping them instead of just toning down the challenge a little bit, which I feel is a horrendous way to handle the difficulty. At any rate, we've still got a DLC to get to, so I'm going to cut things off here. I think the whole thing should fit in one, since there's so few mini dungeons and overworld bosses, so I'll see you then and we can finally end this eternal nightmare.